Let's talk with Jonathan in Arizona. Wants to talk about hell. You up for talking about hell, Shannon?
Yeah, all day. Let's party.
All day.
Let's go.
Talk about hell all day. Come on, Jonathan.
I love your openness, Shannon.
Hi, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Hi, B. I haven't talked to you in a while, and Shannon, this is the first time I've had the opportunity to talk to you, so I'm pretty excited.
Awesome.
So yeah, basically, I've actually spent like the last month thinking about this particular topic of like hell, and so I'm a Christian. I do believe in the biblical hell, eternal suffering, stuff like that. I know other people, religious Christians or whatever, they believe in annihilationism, stuff like that. But basically, I started thinking about it after hearing Matt talking about it and saying what eternal punishment for a finite crime is not justice. And I was curious, if that's something that either of you agree with or disagree with, or what your view is on if hell does exist. Is that fair?
Right. So I like that you phrased it, if hell exists, because I'm happy to go down this hypothetical with you. But that, of course, doesn't mean that we're granting that it does. For me, I see punishment. I see punishment as a way, and probably a very flawed way, based on our limited understanding of how the brain works, to instigate change, right? To say, hey, you did something that we consider to be bad. We're going to punish you so you don't do that again, so that you change your behavior. With hell, my main problem is that, main problem. There are several, but for the purposes of this call, I think it is unjust because it doesn't offer you the option to change, right? It's punishment without a goal. It's punishment for punishment's sake. If you can't learn from a punishment and change your behavior accordingly, then it's just torture, right? And that is granting a lot about punishment itself, right? We could talk about rehabilitation instead and how that might actually be more useful than punishment. But if we're talking about in a standard worldview where, yeah, punishment is good if it motivates change and a positive shift in behavior, cool. That's not what hell does, because it's eternal and you're just stuck there. So there's no use for it. So for me, that's kind of one of those cruxes that makes it difficult to think about hell as just in any way. Shannon, how about you? What do you think?
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts about hell. So for starters,
Shannon, real quick, I do want to hear your point. Do you mind if I address what V said first?
Yeah, sure. That's absolutely fine. Go ahead, and then you're gonna have to listen to me, Jonathan. I have so many things to say. You're gonna sit there and listen to me, Jonathan.
I'm sure I won't remember everything both of you said, so I kind of have a one-track mind.
Okay. Go for it.
So what you said, V, makes a lot of sense, but it makes me wonder, are you for or against the death penalty?
Me personally, I'm against it.
Okay, so are you for life in prison?
Only if it's the last resort and rehabilitation is off the table. But again, that requires a lot of understanding about the structure of our prison system, which is exceedingly problematic, at least here in the U.S. So.
Okay. So basically, there is a point where you agree that punishment is justified if it lasts until, from your perspective, the rest of your life.
Well, there's a difference here, right? The term punishment is different from because we are limited in our abilities, which I'm assuming God is not. The best and most humane thing we can do sometimes is separate somebody from society so that they do not hurt other people anymore. But that doesn't excuse any inhumane treatment of that person while they are separate. So I'm not saying like solitary confinement or bread and water or whatever. I'm just saying, hey, in certain circumstances, because we are limited in our ability to change people, sometimes in very drastic cases, the best option for the most people is to remove a person from society and just put them somewhere where they can live out the rest of their life and not have to interact with people who they might harm. But that's very different from actively punishing them, right? It's not punitive. It's just a measure we need to take in order to safeguard the rest of the population.
Yeah. And
so
Jonathan,
something similar to go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah. So here's a question that I asked myself when I was a Christian, and I didn't like the answer that I came to during my belief retention attempts. Now, if God and sacrificed Jesus, who is also God, so that he can forgive our sins because he really, 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 really wants to forgive us, and we retain the essence of who we are through the virtue of our souls, not just through our corporeal lives on earth, but through the rest of eternity, either in heaven or hell. And what God really wants to do is forgive us, and we continue to be us, even when we're no longer in our finite form. Why does he rescind the opportunity to forgive us the moment we don't have bodies?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll give that a lot of thought and potentially call back when I have more time to think about that. But I obviously wasn't prepared for that question, so I don't want to try and jump into a different topic.
It's kind of my MO.
If that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm. It's not even just about justice at that point. It's about consistency of God and in his principles. So, if you're utilizing hell as if you're seeing hell as a place of justice, right? As a place of justice, first you have to prove that everybody that goes there is somebody who requires some sort of justice be enacted upon them based on their acts. Now, if we view the lens through Christianity, then we're all born sinners. We're all consistently sinners, and we're all sinners up to the point of our death. The only difference is what sends you to hell isn't whether you are or are not a sinner, because we are all sinners. It's whether you do or do not ask God for forgiveness and accept God into your life, depending on the denomination. So that question that I ask you is the only question that really matters, because everybody is on equal footing in regards to whether they are or are not sinners. People are in heaven who are murderers, and people are in hell who are fantastic people, but did not accept God based on the thought process that you're following. So the argument for justice is essentially kind of an illusion, because you're not taking into account the system that puts people either in heaven or in hell. The system is asking for forgiveness and accepting God into your life. And you have to come face to face with the fact that God gives us a finite opportunity, though we exist eternally, to make that choice. And at the only point that God is absolutely apparent to us, he rescinds it. So if he loves us and cares about us and we exist for eternity, why does he only love and care about us enough to forgive us during the most finite portion of our existence if we exist forever? That doesn't seem like love and care. That seems like a game of emotional torture.
Yeah, and again, that's a really good question. I'd love to take some time to think about that and really give it some good thought, because when somebody asks me a question that I've not thought of myself, or is a challenging question to understand, I don't blurt out the first thing that comes to my head, because that's just I need time to actually consider your question to give a good answer.
I appreciate that answer.
Yeah, so that's something I do want to take some more time to think about and see if I either can come to a conclusion that you have reached, or maybe there's more information I'm not aware of, or just give my own personal take on it. So that's a good question, and I do appreciate it. But again, what I'm doing is trying to draw a parallel from theistic justice and atheistic justice.
I can help you there. There is no atheistic justice.
There's just justice as a concept.
Yeah.
And the end.
And different interpretations of what justice means within different circumstances. But atheists don't.
I think inevitably it's going to come down to subjective opinion. I mean, I think that's pretty much, there's no way around that. So V, when you're saying like remove that person from society because there's no chance for them to change their ways, but treat them humanely, stuff. Like you said, don't put them in a solitary confinement, bread and water, stuff like that. So, were you suggesting something along the lines of like house arrest, like until they die? Is that what you're talking about?
I have no idea. That might be an option in some cases. In other cases, it might make more sense to put them with other people for whom we need to do similar preventative measures. But again, like I'm a little bit. Are you just interested in V's take? Because I certainly cannot speak for anyone outside of myself. So I'm more than happy to have this conversation. But if it doesn't tie back to a God belief at all, then maybe we could move this over to the Discord or over to email. Unless I'm missing a strand here, and we're gonna wrap around to what you believe and why.
Yeah. So basically, it's. So I asked you the question, do you believe in the death penalty on purpose? Like, and also, do you believe in eternal punishment, like on purpose? Because I, as a Christian, I do believe that punishment is eternal in hell, right? And if you're saying that, like, I'm on board with punishment of, you're in prison for the rest of your life until you die. Well, I mean, that's eternal punishment too, because when you die, you're dead forever, right? Especially from your perspective of
not eternal punishment.
That has to be true.
Well, it's finite because we're finite.
Right. So I agree. It's not eternal punishment. That's like conscious awareness punishment. But it would be if somebody is given the death penalty.
Right. But Jonathan, I understand where you're going with this. I do. Sure. I get the parallel that you're drawing here. The issue here, it ties kind of back to what Shannon was saying, which is we only do this because we don't have the ability to change people from the inside, right? We don't have the ability to say, I'm going to make you into a good person now. So sometimes, because we are limited in our abilities, we need to take measures that maybe aren't ideal. I'm not saying that this is an ideal situation or a situation that I necessarily think is the best option. I'm just saying that of the options we have right now as limited beings, this is the most humane way that I've seen to deal with this. But you're drawing a comparison between what we as humans are doing to what God is doing. So I'm not saying that it's moral necessarily. I'm not making a moral judgment. I'm saying this is practically what is most humane. But for God, who has the ability to figure out the perfect way to deal with this, you see where that's a discrepancy. We're equating limited humans to an allegedly all-powerful God, and an all-good God at that. So that's where the comparison breaks apart for me.
Yeah, because I think see what you're trying to do, Jonathan. I think what you're trying to do, if I'm understanding what your tactics going into the dialogue are to say, well, it's not really fair to say that God shouldn't put people in hell when we put people in jail, and it's not really fair to appeal to the fact that it happens for eternity when. If from an atheistic perspective, your life is all you have. So if we put people in jail for the rest of their lives, that's an eternity. I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to say, how can you, like, if these two situations are allegorical, which I don't think that they are, then you don't really have a right to argue against hell and say God's not being fair when we as humans are doing this, and if we're being consistent, then that's not fair either. I think that that's what you're trying to get at. But V made a really, really good point there, is that we don't have an all-powerful ability to not even change people's minds, but like remove them or give them the opportunity to recant or provide them information that they can change. Sometimes because we are people, there are people who just want to hurt each other. Now, agreeing with putting somebody in jail for the rest of their life to protect society is something based on the knowledge that we have available to us right now. I would disagree, actually, that that everybody that's in jail for a life sentence should be in jail for a life sentence, and that I think we should work much more strongly towards rehabilitation. And I think a lot of the reason that we have the institutions that we have now is because the sense of justice that we have is entirely tied to retribution and not rehabilitation. And the case, and the reason that that is the case is because people look at it through Judeo-Christian lenses and see that as the definition of justice, and it removes humanity from people. So if I see what you're trying to do, but the situations aren't analogous, because like V said, not only are we not God, and God is God, if you're being consistent, you have to say that's fair forever for them also. Like, even if they accept God in jail, like if they accept God in jail, should we let them go? Even if they haven't been rehabilitated?
No.
Okay, well, he lets them go. Why shouldn't we? If we're making this an analogy that's allegorical, and you think that they map on one for one, then map them one for one, Jonathan. If you think that that's the case, and as soon as somebody accepts God, they should be forgiven of sins and they should no longer be entitled to a punishment, then the moment they accept God in jail, we should let them go.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So when you said let them go,
it's not allegorical.
Prison,
they don't map one for one.
So I missed that part where you said, should we let them go because they accept Jesus? I thought you were referring to people in prison. Should we let them in prison because they accept Jesus?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying if you're going to be consistent as you want atheists to be, you have that. Given you thinking that this analogy maps one for one, which is, it seems like what you're pushing, then you would also have to be consistent one for one. And if they ask forgiveness, let's even say that, the atheists see themselves as God, right? I hear that all the time. If we're in charge of the justice system, if they say that they're sorry to us, should we just let them out?
No, because they could be lying. If God exists, he would know if they're lying or not. But
right, what we're saying that we do not have the abilities that God does, so it's not an analogous situation.
V understands me, Jonathan. Come on, you can.
If V can get it, anyway.
That's exactly what I meant.
I feel like I'm arguing with two ex-girlfriends here. No, I do understand what you're saying.
Only one of us is a girl.
What you said about what? I'm sorry, what?
I said only one of us is a girl.
No, I'm saying I feel like I was arguing with two ex-girlfriends. I was just being facetious. So what you said about why I called Shannon was very, very close to exactly right, but it became not correct when you said therefore we shouldn't think like God says you're forgiven, so we're supposed to forgive you unless you had a prison or anything like that. I'm not saying I'm not representing Christianity saying you're supposed to think this way about morality and punishment and justice the same way that we are. No, not at all. You have every right to question it and just not believe it or have your own opinions of it. I'm not pushing anything on you. I was only asking questions to see if there's a comparison on what I believe as eternal punishment and justice versus what you believe as whatever punishment you believe in, whatever justice you believe in.
You can compare apples to oranges. That doesn't make them the same.
Exactly, and that's what I was calling about is to find out if there's a parallel between like our views on justice and punishment and stuff like that. Again, not trying to like at the end of this call say, and therefore you should believe in Christianity.
Right.
I actually became an atheist because of the concept of hell. I thought it didn't make sense that an all-living God could send somebody to hell, and I actually stopped believing in religion because of that. So hell is something I think a lot about, and I'm not I'm not by any means a scholar. This is all of my education was done on my own in my own time. I have my own books. I read all the time. Sure. I've learned a great deal from the atheist experience and talk heathens. So I'm constantly trying to get more information see if my views are warranted. You know, if I have good reasons to believe it, I do. And then in the last decade, because I became a Christian a decade ago, and before that, I was already watching Atheist Experience, and ever since then, and my belief in Christianity has only become stronger given the arguments that I've learned over the past. But I could still be wrong about all of it, so that's why I keep an interest and I keep looking into it.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, I think that's a great way to approach it, and I think that continuing to watch, continuing to engage and read and do research is a great and intellectually positive way forward. I'm very curious to hear about how you went from Christian to atheist because of the hell concept, and then back to Christian, especially while watching the shows. I feel a little bit like we let you down, Jonathan. But we do have to move on today. However, if you do want to call back, I would love to continue this conversation with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds good. It was nice talking with you.
Yeah, you too, Jonathan. Thank you. Love a good spirited chat about hell. Who doesn't?
Yeah, right? I'm just curious why, like, if hell was the linchpin for him, why he didn't just move to annihilationism.
Right?
Because that's what I did when I was deconverting. I went from, you know, the evangelical Western Christianity version of hell to, oh, maybe we all just go to heaven and hell is just for, you know, Satan. And then I'm like, wait, Satan doesn't exist. Maybe it's just annihilation. And, you know, gradually
hell is permanent separation from God. That's where I went.
Right, exactly.
I didn't go full annihilationist, but I went hell is separation from God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm definitely curious to hear about what got him back.